Ready for a change?
I am talking to you.
Then get ready to explore the quantum possibilities. It's time to transform that outdated paradigm into something universal and new. Time to uncover the truth hidden beneath the veil of lies. A time to think outside the box as we link to a higher consciousness. Welcome to the awakening. And now the hosts of Broadcast Team Alpha, Nori Love and Augie Nost.
Hello, everybody out there. And that's everybody. Here we are again, live on KCOR Radio out of Las Vegas, Nevada. Ready for some cutting-edge conversations on what is outside of the box. My name is Augie, and I'm one of the hosts, and my co-host Nori is not able to be with us tonight. She had a conflict of schedule and just couldn't make it, so she'll be back. She'll be all right. Now, we have a phenomenal guest with us tonight, but before I introduce you to the guest, I'd like to tell you how you can also connect with us. You will find us at broadcastteamalpha.com, and we're on YouTube with the same name. And yes, you go to YouTube and check out our other shows. We got some real doozies out there, all the way from how science now can say we can reverse the aging process, and time travel, we cover that, and even Nori talks about law of attraction. My co-host is a double certified law of attraction life coach, and she has several shows on this. So you really need to listen to that. Go to there, and she explains how we can reach into the quantum, latch on to things that is already ours, and pull it back into the physical reality. That gets very interesting. And we talk about how to reach into the universal consciousness and do some amazing things. So, and when you are on YouTube, on Broadcast Team Alpha, please subscribe. That's going to help us a lot, and it will help you. And click on that little bell next to the subscribe button, because when you click on that bell, you're going to get notifications when the next shows are coming up. Otherwise, you won't get them. So do that. That's going to be a good one for you. And for those of you that like to hear this show again, go to broadcastteamalpha.com. Or YouTube, Twitter, or 7 other platforms out there. And of course, at KCOR Radio, in the archives, we are there under Broadcast Team Alpha at kcorradio.com. And when you are at kcorradio.com, which you probably are right now listening, just go down to the bottom of the page. There is this wonderful feature down there. There's a yellow button. It's called a donate button. And if you like what you hear today, we would love it if you also will be able to show your gratitude and give us a donation. That'll really help us. And it will also tell us that we are doing the right thing. And we surely appreciate it. And if you can't do that, that's okay. There are strange times now with the so-called pandemic out there. So we understand, but we love you because you're here listening, and you will be with us all the way through the show. So let me introduce you to our guest. This is Professor Adam Stokes. He's been on this show before, so he's returning with a different kind of knowledge than he did last time. We talked about giants last time. You know, those skeletons that has been found around the world, 10, 12, or 18-foot tall skeletons, that human skeletons. Yeah, they do exist. But today we're going to talk about something totally different that he has a very solid education and research background in. And that is ancient religious and spiritual texts. I'm going to say a few things about his background because that kind of gives him a little more credibility. He holds a degree from Duke University and Yale Divinity School in Religious and Biblical Studies. He understands several languages, including Hebrew, Ancient Greek, Latin, and German. And he writes and lectures on ancient cultures and civilizations, with a special interest in the ancient American civilizations and the giants. And his work is published in many journals and publications around the world, and he is a featured guest on many podcasts and radio shows and so on. And he is here to tell us what is behind the curtain of ancient religious texts. And his name here, I said again, it's Professor Adam Oliver Stokes. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Great to be back, Augie. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to have you here because this is going to be interesting. Gosh, I tell you, Nori's going to miss this because this is one of her favorite subjects.
I know. I wish you were here.
Yeah, we're going to miss her because she will be with the one with the good questions this time, but she is missing. So we'll just do the best we can. You know, the thing about ancient religious texts is that not all of it showed up in the Bible or other holy books. I mean, a lot of it don't even show up in the Quran or any other books there. Why is there a disconnect, do you think, like this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think so. Like you said, there's so much material that did not make it into the official canon of the Bible and other sacred scriptures. Like you said, the Quran. I always tell my students, I actually teach a course on the Bible, on the Old Testament. I basically say the Old Testament is a plagiarized version of myths and stories and narratives that happened way before the time of its writers. So a lot of Sumerian stories, ancient Near Eastern stories, those kind of get appropriated and reinterpreted and reread in the Old Testament text itself. And I think that a lot of this earlier material and these other narratives about biblical figures such as Enoch and Abraham and Noah and etc. got basically pushed aside because the people who decided the canon, whether it be the Jewish rabbis or the Christian councils of the patristic era, wanted a single narrative to kind of promote their own agendas and what they wanted people to know. So I think that so much has been kind of, I was watching my wife cook earlier today. I was talking to her. So much of the fat has been chopped off by organized religion to get this single narrative. When we look at the broader picture, we look at extra biblical text, pseudepigrapha, apocrypha, etc. Those are the words that academics use. I don't think when you say apocrypha, you're kind of, in my opinion, relegating these books to second class. But for me, it's all it's all on the same page. But so much has been left out because of that.
Yeah, and you used the word plagiarized, and I just tell you, I love you for using that word because much of it, that's actually how it happened. Decades ago, I got my hands on a transcript from the meeting at Constantinople, Turkey, which was Nicaea at the time, in 325 and 26 and 27, when they wrote the first draft to what became the Bible. And I tell you, those guys, the 223 people got together there. They were the chosen one by the Emperor Constantine, and he said, go to Nicaea, create a religion, and do not emerge before you have done so.
Yeah. It's funny you mention that, Augie, because what I was taught in Sunday school, I was raised Baptist. My wife was raised Catholic. and you hear basically the narrative that's put out is that there was an original true church, aka the Roman Catholic Church, whatever you would call it, and the rest of these guys were just a bunch of heretics who were trying to corrupt the faith, trying to destroy the true faith. But I think you mentioned 325 CE in the Council of Nicaea. Before that time, there wasn't just one. The more truthful picture is that there wasn't just one Christianity. There were multiple Christianities, some with even, I would just say this bluntly, with more legitimacy than the Roman Catholic Church, than what will become the Roman Catholic Church. There were many Christianities out there, vying for power, vying for control. And this is just the version. And I think 325 is, you hit the nail right on the head, Agi. It's exactly when it happens, is when you start to get this official narrative, with all the other narratives being declared as false, or if you believe in these other narratives, you get penalized, you get punished, and even put to death for them.
Yeah, put to death for your belief. That was very common back then. And in fact, when they got this stuff, it took them about 3 years or so to pull all the stuff together. And in there, they talked about the fact, in that document that I had decades ago, they talked about they were 9,000 scrolls, tablets, and old texts that they went through, and they picked off of what they wanted from certain scroll, they rewrote it, and then they burned the original.
So you have 66 books presently in your basic, I'd say, Protestant canon of the Bible. So what happened to all those other thousands of scrolls that you just mentioned? So 66 is a lot. That's not even trimming the fat. That's like leaving, one slither of meat. You've chopped off most of the meat as well with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And when you mentioned that the Christianity before 325, they had a lot of credibility because they were kind of the direct source. They were talking about the direct source of what actually happened.
So if you look at a lot of the Nag Hammadi texts, so these are found right before the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1945. And they contained the scriptures of a group of Christians called the Gnostics, and many of the Gnostics. So again, the official narrative that you'll get if you talk to the Catholic Church, or if you talk to Christian evangelicals, is that Gnosticism was a foreign influence on true Christianity, but that's not the case. A lot of the Gnostics, Marcion, Valentinus, etc., traced themselves back to the original apostles, and so we have gospels that are in the Gnostic corpus, claimed to be written by specific apostles: the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary. Yes, I said a woman; she was just as much an apostle as the rest of them. Whereas, if you contrast that with what we have in the official Christian New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, biblical scholars will say this. You can ask any biblical scholar anywhere in the world, Agi. They would say, we don't know who these authors are. Those are names that were just given to these texts later, but what became the official church grasped onto these 4 books, but we don't know who the heck wrote these books. But we do know, at least from the claims that the Gnostics made, that they are getting this knowledge, they are getting these traditions about Jesus directly from specific apostles. So in that regard, one might say that these are even more accurate texts than what you have in your official New Testament.
Yeah, and back then there wasn't a lot of writing, because a lot of the stories was handed from father to son, from father to daughter, and they were good at that. They didn't forget. They got things accurate. So a lot of the stuff that we later on was in writing, that was pretty close.
Yes. They were, I always tell my students this. I ask them a question: where did the Apostle Paul get his Old Testament from? The Old Testament. So he quotes profusely in his letters the Old Testament, and I asked him, where did he get the Old Testament from? Well, the Old Testament was in his head. he was a Pharisee. He had it passed down by his lineage, by the people in his lineage before him, and by the Pharisees that trained him. So it was all in his head. So when he put it down, it was pretty. It was exact. So they took very special care to, once something was written down, to have it preserved just the way that it was. And this kind of brings me to the Gnostic Gospels again. So a lot of critics will say, well, these Gospels, when we found the Nag Hammadi text, they date to the 3rd century BCE because they exhibit examples of Platonism, which is a type of Greek philosophy. But what you have to understand is that these are written down from traditions that were carried on in the heads of people, passed on through apostolic succession over many, many centuries and decades. So you're going back to the source. And again, I will say it, I think a source that in many ways is closer to Jesus and the original apostles than what you get in the New Testament.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you, there's one more thing that I want to run by you. I want your opinion on it, because I'm going to step outside of the box here a little further than, maybe a little further than you are. Because some of the old prophets, they were not stupid people. And in some of the old writings that I found when I wrote the book about spiritual science and higher conscious thinking, I found several references to these prophets having met with the shiny ones.
Mm-hmm.
The shiny ones, they suddenly showed up and they suddenly left. That, I think, could be angelic, or they could be a light being, which some people call it. What do you think of that?
So in my mind, Agi, I don't think that, angels, extraterrestrials, beings from higher dimensions, that all blurs together for me. It's just a matter of terminology.
Mm-hmm.
If you, I think we talked about this before, but if you took a person who's had a UFO encounter and you brought them 2,000 years back in time into Old Testament times, the people in Judea would say that the person has seen an angel. So there's not. I view them all as the angel, UFO, higher dimensional beings, one and the same. And it's interesting because in Hebrew, there's a couple of things that are going on here which are actually really neat in relation to what you just said. So the term Elohim is itself a masculine, feminine, plural noun. So that Lamed, as they call it in Hebrew, is masculine, the Hey is feminine, and the Hirik Yod Mem ending at the end is plural. So literally the gods. Now, who are the gods? Well, you have this association of the gods with the seraphim, and seraph is literally the term in Hebrew for the burning ones or the beings of light. So I think they all go together. And in an ancient context, if you saw a flying saucer, I mean, I've had a couple of encounters myself. I know you have, Agi. It's something that you never forget. So in the minds of the ancient, that would certainly, they would certainly say that was God or angels, but probably even God.
Yep. That is one of the things that you never forget if you have that experience. And they have been around a long time. People 2,500 years ago, they saw them too.
And they put them in their drawing and paintings and stuff. You have UFOs and actual paintings of the Virgin Mary and the Christ child. There'll be a UFO sitting right in the back there. And people are like, well, we don't know what this is. We have to speculate about it. You know exactly what it is. It's a UFO. It's sitting right there. So it's a flying saucer. It's sitting right there. But yes, people have been seeing these things for thousands of years, Agi.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that they had interactions. They had contacts back then too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot, and this not just in a biblical context, but I think for the Greeks and Romans, a lot of their culture and civilization that they get is from these higher beings. Now, the Greeks refer to them as, the gods of Olympus. But where is Olympus? Olympus is in outer space. I mean, it's technically on the mountain Olympus, but it's in a dimension that's kind of beyond ours. So if you climb Mount Olympus, you can't get there. I think both for the Greeks and for the Israelites, they were having these encounters all the time. And this is what, and these beings, whatever you call them, gave them a lot of their knowledge and a lot of their civilization.
Yeah. And now you learn several languages, and the Hebrew is one of them. Old Hebrew, if people start looking into what the old Hebrew and the old languages, what they are and what the translations came out to be, they will actually see some of the dislocation. I found out something today that was very interesting. This is what magicians use. They use the word abracadabra. You know what that means?
I actually do not.
It means I create as I speak.
Oh, wow. Wow.
With other words, when they speak something, they speak it into existence.
Yeah. That's, and that reminds me of kind of what God is described as doing in the beginning of the Old Testament. God speaks and things come into being. It's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And that's phenomenal, because when you think about that and what we have learned now with quantum mechanics, this is possible. So it is all one of the capabilities within this mind-created universe that we are all in. Once we understand who we are and what the environment, and we can create in that environment. Yeah. As we speak.
Well, it's interesting. I'd love to talk more about this, but in my own religious tradition, I'm not sure how many minutes I have left, but I'm part of a Latter-day Saint tradition. And in my tradition, we believe that humans have basically godlike capabilities, and that by obeying certain laws of the universe, we can create kind of worlds for ourselves, and that creation continues after death. So we continue creating worlds and universes and planets for ourselves. So that's very much in line with that type of thinking that you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, it gets interesting once you start walking into these kind of old texts and looking at them. Oh man, when you get a hold of a book like that, you can lose 3 days.
Easily, yes. Yeah. So, and notice how in the Latter-day Saint tradition, they're finding this from other texts, not just the Bible, but they're looking at, we believe that there's a corpus of just scriptures all over the world. Of course, the most famous being the Book of Mormon, but various other texts that give people this knowledge about how to create for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, now we blew away a half hour, so we have about 30 seconds left for break. Let's do the break, and then we'll come back, and we will talk a little bit more about, maybe a little bit about my research too, about this guy you know as Jesus.
This is the Broadcast Team Alpha Show, hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. The one show that takes your doubts of the unknown and spins them into reality. Share your thoughts by calling our hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Call now. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More cutting-edge conversation and exploration of the quantum universe after this.
Every year, around the world, thousands of golden retrievers are abused, abandoned, and neglected, and they need your help. Goldens Without Borders is a 501c3 not-for-profit company located in the heart of southern Nevada. They focus on golden retrievers in countries where neglect and mistreatment is of the worst imaginable. Even the smallest donations go a long way to saving a life and helping put these beautiful dogs into loving, forever homes. Come be a part of a network of people working hard to make the world a safer and more humane place for all living creatures. To make a donation, or if you're interested in adopting or fostering, please visit goldenswithoutborders.org. Goldens Without Borders, help make a difference today.
great.
It's great. I think it's great.
I think it's
The
great.
all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Make a note of it. It's great.
We interrupt this program to annoy you and make things generally irritating.
At the end of the day, we turn the lights down in the KCOR studio.
Oh, sweet.
And crank up the hottest club songs from around the world.
This is the future.
The Grind, mixed by Tina Marie, your Vegas vixen of the high desert.
What about the body? What kind of body?
Good body. Nice body.
Every night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Pacific. The best 3 hours of commercial-free music.
New music. First.
It's time to stand up and dance your ass off. The Grind, nightly and exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Come on, it's kind of hot.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, come discover the universal core to all your issues by tapping into the unseen world, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. From the metaphysical, simultaneous realities, alchemy, as well as the ascension process, the hosts of the unseen world will take you on a roller coaster ride through the metaphysical matrix. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. The Unseen World, live, Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Come awaken to an endless world of possibilities.
Going live.
Come explore the quantum possibilities. This is Broadcast Team Alpha.
Broadcast Team Alpha.
To be on the show live, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. Share your thoughts of the show on Twitter at KCOR Radio, #KCOR. Or join the cutting edge conversation live in our chat room at KCORradio.com. Now back to Broadcast Team Alpha with your free thinking hosts, Nori Love and Aginas.
Hello, hello. We are back with the Broadcast Team Alpha, and my name is Agi. I'm one of the hosts, and I'm sorry to say my co-host Nori could not make it to this one. Conflict of schedules happened, so we will look to see her come back soon. And we are talking with Professor Adam Stokes, and we are discussing old religious and spiritual texts. And this is really getting interesting because there is some disconnects between the official holy books and what some of the older spiritual text is talking about. But before we go there, I want to also give you a little bit of technical information here about how you can get a hold of us. We are at Broadcast Team Alpha. Go there and look at all our videos. We have some doozies. And down at the bottom of the page of KCORradio.com, which you are probably listening on, there is a donate button down there, and we would love for you if you can help us out also there. That will be wonderful. It tells us we are doing the right thing and it'll help the show going. So we will thank you. But if you can't, that is wonderful. I know there's tricky times these days with the pandemic, so we just love you being here. And I'm going to have a look at the chat room. We have quite a few people here, a whole bunch actually. Summer is here. Hey, Summers. And Karen Nelson. And Tina Marie, of course, she's here overseeing everything. She is the one in control. Shady D. Good evening, Shady D. You must be on the East Coast. It's not quite evening here yet. Tina Marie, yeah, you're still here. And Shady D. And Q to you. I'm glad you're here. Pink and Duck, Margaret. Hello, Margaret. Yeah, you are here too. And Parked Cake. Oh, I love cake. And Nars, Iowa Girl, Margaret. You're still here. You were here about 3 posts up. How about that? And then we have Rub, Margaret again, and Shady D. Lisa is here, and Fancy. All right, and then that's the ones that is saying anything and talking, and then for all the others, if you just go in there and say hello, I will talk to you too, because otherwise I don't know how to do this. I don't see it. Nori is always doing the chat rooms, and she's good at that, and this is my first time on there, so I'm just kind of soloing it this time. Anyway, we're talking with Professor Stoke here about old religious texts, and it gets really interesting. I said before the break that we should talk a little bit about this guys you know as Jesus. Well, of course, we know his name was not Jesus, because the letter J was invented by the Pope in approximately around, I'm not so exactly sure, there is some conflict in the dating of that, somewhere between 1400 and 1600, that J was put into the alphabet, so that name is impossible to be, but we find that it's Joshua. Yeah. According to the old surviving Roman records, he went by 3 names. One of them was Joshua Beth Halachme, which Halachme was Joseph's last name. And I want to just throw that out there before Adam gets on, because I wonder what he has come up with that in that regard. Do you know anything about this, Adam?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned the J thing, because I tell my students in the high school I teach at, I've been teaching Latin for about 6 or 7 years now, and I tell them that Latin does not have a J. That actually is later. That's not even in early ecclesiastical Latin, but everywhere where you see J later on in Latin text was actually originally an I. So J is very late. So the name Joshua is actually from the Hebrew Yehoshua, which means God saves, basically, and that gets kind of trimmed in later centuries. So Jesus' name, we say Jesus in English, but his name would have been probably Yehoshua or Yeshua, which translates as Joshua into English. It's interesting because a lot of people will say, I know we were talking about this, that Jesus might not have existed. And to some extent, it's a legitimate point because the Romans kept really good records, but there do seem to be traces. We have enough references out to Jesus outside of the New Testament, not even taking into account the Gnostic literature, which I think itself is historical evidence for Jesus. But we have enough references from the Romans and from their historians to ascertain that Jesus existed. Tacitus, Josephus talks about Jesus. Now, there's a paragraph. I'm trying to think of what it's called, but there's a whole paragraph that Josephus supposedly wrote about Jesus, but that's likely a fraud because he calls Jesus the Son of God and the Messiah, so that's likely a Christian interpolation. But he mentions elsewhere James, the brother of Jesus, Yaakov bar Yeshua, not Yaakov ach Yeshua. So James, the brother of Jesus. So that seems to be a historical reference to Jesus there. Also, we have some allusions to rather unfavorable views of Jesus in the discussions of the Emperor Claudius and the Emperor Julian the Apostate, who didn't like the Christians, so he was looking for any way to really bash Jesus. So, And he alludes to, in the Imperial Archives, there's stuff about Jesus, at least from the Roman perspective, being kind of a criminal, a kind of zealot terrorist. Not saying that that's what I believe, but that's how Emperor Claudius and the Emperor Julian perceived him. So that, to me, lends credit to the idea that we're looking at a historical figure. Of course, I believe in the existence of Jesus as a person of faith. I take that on faith, but there seem to be there is historical evidence for that as well. Perhaps the most interesting is this. I know we talked about this yesterday, and you almost started me having a 3-hour conversation on this. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Teacher of Righteousness.
Oh, yeah.
Likely may be Jesus himself. So Robert Eisenman argued, he is one of the preeminent biblical scholars. He argued that the Teacher of Righteousness could be either James, the brother of Jesus, or Jesus himself. So, and that Teacher of Righteousness says a lot of things that are very similar to what Jesus says, especially in the Gnostic Gospels.
There is a book out there. The title of the book is "Did Jesus Live 100 BC?" No, he actually didn't. According to the document, the transcript from the meetings in Constantinople, they reference the Teacher of Righteousness, which actually nobody knew his name because he never used it. He was always called the Teacher of Righteousness.
Yeah.
But they took a lot of his writings and whatever was written down from him and used and credited that to Joshua. Then they did that, and that's in their writing in the document. In fact, if anybody want to get their hands on this document, I keep talking about this, but I forget to tell people where they can find it. I got it from University Press in England. That is Oxford University Press in England. And if you write to Oxford University or go to their website, you can get into Oxford University Press. You may be able to contact somebody. You've got to remember, the government of England is supposed to be the guardians of the Christian faith, so they may not want to give you this right away. But if you find it, you can go into the archives and probably find it. Also, another place I know they have it because I found it. Found a reference to it anyway, and that is at the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, Turkey. Now, of course, in Istanbul, Turkey, that's where they did it, so it makes sense they would have it. But there's two places that I know they have the transcripts from the meeting at Constantinople or Nicaea in 325, 26, and 27. Anyway.
Yeah. It's I think for many years, Aki, that stuff wasn't even translated. I remember when I was at Yale, if you wanted to read any of that stuff, and I'm so glad you pointed out to the listeners that you had to know Greek and know it really darn well. So to get the minutes of that. So but like you said, Oxford University Press has the English translation of it now, so now that's accessible to everyone. But it used to be darn hard to track that stuff down. I'm actually impressed that you did
it. Yeah, I imagine they didn't really want people to know about it.
No, that's why they kept it in Greek. You have to know Greek to be able to translate it, and you have to know Greek really, really well to be able to read it. So yeah. And
another thing too is that I just want to say real quickly is that there's a lot of people out there that claim Jesus never existed, because if he was that big of a figure close to 2,000 years ago, why is there nothing written about him? Well, there is. There is actually things written about him. We know that he did exist.
Yeah.
Because many of the old writings, they speak of him not by his name, but they call him also Messiah.
So, so Mashiach, in the Hebrew. And it's interesting, going back again to the Dead Sea Scrolls and even to the Septuagint. So it was interesting because the Israeli government, so when the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'll give some background here. They were found in the 1940s. And it contains not only texts from the Old Testament, but also many, in fact, the vast majority of the text were what we consider apocrypha, so stories outside of the Old Testament, narratives about Old Testament figures and persons that we hadn't even known before. And then a small portion of the scrolls were the sectarian rules for the community that wrote them, the Dead Sea Scroll community, or the Essenes, as people call them. There's some debate amongst biblical scholars about that. But the person who first headed the Dead Sea Scroll project was a Catholic priest named DeVoe. And the Israeli government came in and basically took his project over completely. Mm-hmm. And people have speculated, I don't know how accurate this is, but people have speculated that some of that was because there were in the scrolls a very close identification between the Messiah and Jesus. And it's interesting because if we have the teacher of righteousness identified with Jesus, that would be problematic not only for the Israeli government, for example, but also for Christians, because the Dead Sea Scroll community doesn't die out till around 70 CE. So if that teacher of righteousness was still alive, that would mean Jesus did not die in 30 CE on the cross, but lived to be an old man. And we even have some traditions, Irenaeus, for example, who says that, Jesus lived to be an old person with children. And in Islam, in the Quran, Jesus doesn't die on the cross. So there's a lot of, my point is there's a lot of, going down the rabbit hole, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of controversial.
Oh, I love you for saying that, Adam, because that brought me onto something I just got to say it. And that is another piece of research that I found when I wrote that book, Spiritual Science. And that is the fact that there is in the surviving Roman records a record of the Messiah buying land outside of Rome in the year 63.
Mm-hmm. Which is totally doable. If Jesus was born in 4 BCE, that's totally doable. You have plenty. Yeah. Now, life expectancy in Rome was short, but you have plenty of people out in the desert and stuff who lived, St. Anthony, for example, to be 80, 90 years old. Jesus would have only been like 60 in his late 60s then. That's totally possible.
Yeah. And he was not born in the year 0. There is some conflict between the year 4 and the year 5.
Yes.
But I think you're probably closer to what you just said, where he was, and he was not born in on December. He was born in, was it? Oh gosh, April.
Yes, the
4th.
Yeah, the New Testament stories allude to that. Even though Jesus' birthday is celebrated in December, the weather would have made that the way the weather is described in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke would have made that impossible to have been in December.
Absolutely.
I think it's later on. I'm thinking April or even like May or sometime. I need to look that up. I should probably know Jesus' real birthday. So, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look, I'm losing my words here because there is so much disconnect between the actual surviving Roman records, the meetings at Nicaea, and the old Nag Hammadi and all the other old texts and the Bible. I know I'm not going to make any friends by saying this, but somebody is trying to control the people by creating that book.
Yeah. I think, and I've mentioned this on other podcasts before, and I'm not afraid to say it. I'm a person of faith. I believe in Jesus. My own path to salvation is through Jesus. But if you look at the various Christianities that we mentioned earlier, there was only the Roman Catholic Church has the idea of being saved through Jesus' crucifixion and having to believe in Jesus' crucifixion. And if you have that narrative, then that allows you to basically have control over the people, because the priest is the one that mediates Jesus' grace from the cross to the people. But if you have but in these other Christianities, especially Gnostic Christianity, your salvation comes through knowledge, through the wisdom that you attain through Sophia, the feminine divine, the feminine wisdom. So with that in mind, you don't need a priesthood at all. You don't need a priest to mediate God's grace to you. You have that within yourself, and when you become enlightened. So you can see why, and I think you again hit the nail around the head, why these other Christianities were pushed aside, because that's a direct threat. That's a direct threat to the priesthood, and therefore the control that the priesthood has over the people. If the people think that they can only find Jesus and salvation through the church, then that keeps the church in power for a long time.
Absolutely. And Linda Gold in the chat room, she says, he went to India. And she is exactly right, because there is actually records of him having been there.
Yes. There's a really famous text, The Life of Isa, The Unknown Life of Jesus. And they call him Isa in it. And it has him going to Tibet and studying with the Tibetan Buddhist monks there. And when the English translation of it was first published, everyone said this was a hoax. This was, the guy was just making this up. But the person who translated it had traveled to Tibet, and he never recanted his story. He never said he was doing it, for personal gain. He was saying this was an actual document I found in the Tibetan libraries, and I'm translating it. And the library actually saw a picture of this. It's funny you mentioned it the other day. Some of the most vast and biggest libraries, even with the Chinese occupation, are found in Tibet. They have thousands and thousands and thousands of scrolls that nobody has translated yet because they're in Tibet. I saw, there's a picture the other day, fascinating picture of a guy just walking through the library, and there were scrolls at least like 2 or 3 stories high all around him.
Yeah, I saw that picture. There was in drawers, halfway drawn out.
Did you post that picture? Yes,
I think that was huge. Undescribed, untranslated scrolls.
Yes. So who knows what those have?
Yeah. I know. Man, oh man. And I also want to mention that I had a Bible that was written back in Europe. That was written about 1720, 1730, something like that. And just for the fun, I brought it with me to the United States when I came. And I was kind of, at one time, or decades ago now, I was trying to compare. I believe it was written in Danish, but, I understand Danish, so I could compare to the English version of today, and it wasn't even the same book. There was one story that I could not find. Do you remember that story when they asked Jesus about, why aren't you paying any taxes? And he said, show me a coin. And they showed him a coin, and he looked at the coin and he said, whose picture is that? So they said, well, yeah, it's the Caesar. Okay, so give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God. That story does not exist in that old Bible.
Oh, wow.
I bet there was some bureaucrat somewhere said, nah, we don't want that.
Check that out.
Yeah.
That's the history of the Bible. I always tell my students, so I take them through kind of the process of the Bible from the original Hebrew to translate it into the Greek. So you have the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, and there are a bunch of stories in the Septuagint that are not in the Hebrew text, and vice versa. So the story of David and Goliath, one of the most famous stories, is not in the Septuagint, not at all. So it makes you think, what was originally there and who was taken out. Like you said, who was taken out, what, and why.
Oh, I see now that we're down to about 3 minutes to the end of the show. I want you to let people know where they can contact you. And you have a book out. Tell us a little bit more about your book, because this explains the disconnect between the old text and the Bible. And it gets really interesting in that book. So please tell us about that and where they can find you.
Absolutely. So I have a Instagram page that I'm always posting stuff about ancient civilizations, the Bible, Greek Roman myths on. It's called Adam the Giant Guy, and I'm always posting on there. I have a book that just came out called The Latin Scrolls, which is a translation of what are known as the Megillot in Judaism from the Latin Vulgate, my own translation of them. I give a lot of commentary and introductory material to it. And I also have in that book an apocryphal text of the Book of Esther. So a sample of Esther that's not in the Hebrew text, but was in the Greek and in the Latin. I have that translated as well. I also have a site. It's called Lingua Classica. It's technically my tutoring site. That's my other job. But I also put a lot of stuff about the Bible, including Bible manuscripts and that version of the Luther Bible, the German Bible that I told you about in our conversation, Aggie. I put a bunch of pictures and a bunch of scans up there. So those are the two places, Instagram and my Lingua Classica site, that you can find me. And my book, The Latin Scrolls, just came out, published by Cognella Press, if you want a translation from the Vulgate.
Are you on Amazon with that?
Yes, I am as well. I meant to mention, thank you for mentioning that. So I have an author page, just type in Adam Stokes, and my books, The Giant Book from Egypt to Ohio, as well as Latin Scrolls will pop up.
So the best thing then is to go to Amazon and put your name in there, and then everything will come up.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's good. And now we got 30 seconds left, so we thank you very much, Adam, for being with us. Oh, this was so interesting. And we will be back next week with another fascinating guest, so come on back. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Broadcast Team Alpha.
Broadcast Team Alpha.
Hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. Every Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The balance of power is shifting to a new paradigm. Will you be ready? For more information on Broadcast Team Alpha, as well as the hosts, Nori Love and Augie Nost, please visit their website at broadcastteamalpha.com. Until next week, remember to keep those minds open while always exploring the endless quantum possibilities.
Broadcast Team Alpha. Over and out.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.